My name is Ben Williams. I'm a Texas broker in El Paso, Texas, and I run the Williams Advanced Realty team. We are going to talk about the 24/1 today. In short, the TXR 24/1, it's really for FSBOs. Everybody thinks it's for FSBOs, but it can be used for other things too. It can be used for off-market properties, FSBOs, and even leases. This is an example of when you, as an agent, you have a buyer client that wants to transact on any of these properties, and there is no listing broker. You represent the buyer, meaning that you've already got a buyer representation agreement signed, meaning that you are actively working with this buyer. You establish agency, and you are finding the property, or they found the property, or something like that. And what you're supposed to do as an agent before showing the property, I highly suggest that you present the 24/1 and the information about broker services to the owner. Those are the two documents that you're going to need to really get this party started. And you register that particular buyer with the owner, and you negotiate your compensation up front before the property is even shown. Whatever the example that may be, 3% flat fee. You do all of these things prior to showing the property. And what this really does is, at the end of the day, it says that no matter what, if you've done all these things and you've negotiated, even if a owner tries to cut you out, this established that you have a binding agreement with that owner that your compensation is protected, and compensation is earned when the owner enters into a binding contract. If you do all these things and do it right, the owner enters into a binding contract with a purchase agreement. Technically, your compensation is earned at that point in time. That's what this document says. So I know a lot of times when people are talking to me or asking me questions, the 24/1 really is clear about when compensation is earned. A little bit different than our normal listing agreements and buyer representation agreements, but it's earned when the owner enters into contract. A lot of times people just don't really understand that. Any questions about that before we jump into the form? Let's talk about the form itself, the TXR 24/1 compensation agreement between broker and owner. What the form is not, I thought it was pretty important to say what it's not. A buyer's representation agreement. It is not a listing agreement. It doesn't have any of those terms and provisions that establish that agency agreement between this owner and you, or owner and the broker. It is a direct compensation between the broker and owner. That's what it established. And it's simple as this. The purpose is this: if I bring this prospect and you sell or lease to the prospect, here's how I get paid. It's just simple as that. All right. If you really want to establish that with someone that doesn't have a broker involved in their sale or lease of their property, this is what this form does, along with the information about broker services. And I'm going to keep on reminding you that you've already got to establish buyer's representation agreement with the prospect, at least when it comes to residential. There's nothing saying that you have to have a buyer's representation agreement with commercial leases, but with residential, you need to have a buyer's representation agreement already signed and in place prior to putting this in place. Let's talk about paragraph 1. Paragraph 1 is the parties. Insert the name of the owner, their address, and applicable information if you have it. Most times you probably don't have the phone number. Put the broker information in there as well. And then the property itself in paragraph 2 have the legal description. You get that from the El Paso CAD or some type of tax roll. Paragraph 3, the asking price as opposed to sales price. In this case, paragraph 3, if you're trying to buy, use 3A. Example being $238,000. If you're doing something with a lease, put in the monthly amount or whatever that looks like. If you're not using 3B, I suggest that you put NA in there just to specify. Don't leave anything blank. Put NA. You're registering the prospect, giving the name of the prospect and the owner's name in there as well. Paragraph 5 is the terms. All right, paragraph 5. When I think about the terms, I always think about, okay, you want to give yourself enough time to negotiate the contract, think about the inspections, the appraisal, to clear the close, the timelines you need, and make that call. I feel 90 days should be long enough, in my opinion, but there's no real answer to this question. If you feel it's a year, you can do that. But I think a 90-day timeline for the terms, beginning and ending, should be okay. Paragraph 6, this is pretty simple. This one right here, it goes and says, okay, if your client is buying a house, then you only focus on 6A, right? That's only for the sale. And insert whatever that's going to be, whether that's 3%, 2%, 2.5%, a flat fee, whatever, right? That's what you're going to put in there. Now, you got to also keep in mind that you should already have a buyer's representation agreement filled out, and it should be of that amount or whatever you put in there. Questions about the first page before we go further?
Sorry, Ben, what did you say was the term agreement or that you recommended?
I think 90 days should be adequate to me, but it could be based on a lot of different things. I had one FSBO that we made a term of almost 6 months because they had put it on the market. When I went to go talk to them, they didn't want to sell it till 4 months away. And I tried to do a whole lease back and all this other stuff. They didn't want to do it. So we ended up doing a 6-month agreement for this FSBO. You just got to gauge that as you go in and have that conversation with people and see what they want and what they're trying to do.
Because I know I had one not too long ago, and I think I had put it for 90 days, and he was questioning why I put it for so long. And I'm like, anything can happen. But I found him something else that was being sold by an agent. Thank God.
Yeah. Let's say the prospect, they may have questions about that. So it comes down to communication and being transparent with everybody in the whole process. Okay. No question about page 1. Let's go into page 2. I think we're going to page 2. Page 2. So page 2 gets in the aspect of leases. And in short, you got 3 options based on the pay for leases: percentage of the monthly rent, a percentage of all the rent during the term, or some type of flat fee. It also defines the payment schedule. You got to be clear about what that's going to be. It has examples of one-time payment, or it says in 2 payments as follows. All right, 1/2 and 1/2. Then number 3, you could write out a payment schedule if you were going to do something with a lease with a particular owner. 6.2 talks about 6B2 about renewals and expansions. Typically, I have not seen people get some type of payment on residential leases for renewals or extensions and stuff like that. I have not seen it. Very uncommon. However, there is a provision that says, hey, broker still gets paid if there is a renewal. You could negotiate that into the contract. Paragraph 6B3 says this is something that you should try to negotiate. If you're doing a lease and you found the tenant, this is the most important aspect of it. You bake in, hey, if that tenant end up buying the house, that you get a commission. So if you are doing leases, paragraph 6B3 is where you would say, if this tenant ends up buying this house, I still get paid. All right. Any questions about paragraph 6? Let's go to paragraph 7. In short, who you're representing. Most times you're going to do 7A2, especially with residential. You're only going to be representing the prospect. There might be a time you check off 7A3, but talk to me first before you even try and do 7A3. But most likely you're going to do 7A2 because you probably already got a buyer rep agreement signed with the buyer. 7B, this explains what intermediary is. We already got a class on that before. If you want to see about intermediary, just go look it up on the site. We got a class about that. I just explaining what intermediary is to the potential seller or owner. Let's go to 3. The first thing, if there's any addendas that's going to be added to this, if there's going to be a HOA addendum or anything outside of information about broker services that we're adding that the seller needs to have, we're going to put that in there. Seller's disclosure, anything like that, we want to sit there and say, hey, this is added in there, right? We need to make sure we specify that to the seller. And then paragraph 9 is all of the legalese stuff, the other legal provisions and things like that that goes along with this whole contract. Last but not least, you got to have your signatures. In our case, it says broker's printed name and broker or associate you sign on the left-hand side, and the owner will sign on the right-hand side. I got down here, this is a binding agreement and is only valid if both signatures are there. It's recommended that the commission be part of the closing disclosure. Make sure this is happening when you go to close. This is to avoid any disputes with the owner about being paid. Does anybody have any questions? Did this make it clear to you on what you need to do?
Ben, Ben, for the addenda part on 8, do we have to put the exact form name or just what it is?
I always think you should put like TXR 2501, 20. It helps. The more that you take the guessing game out of it, the better off it'll be. Good question.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Hope you guys have a good weekend.
Thanks,
Bye
Ben.
bye.
Later.
Thank you, Ben.
You too.